Prime Minister.
The world we live in today is a world that is segregated due to the lack of exposure of other races and because we are not patriotic enough. The stance coming from the side of opening government is as much as possible. We want to create a society that cares more about our races and a society that isn't segregated because of vernacular schools. We have a three-pronged policy on the side of opening government. The first, we will make it mandatory to attend to all these national service programs. Secondly, schools who do not implement these systems will be shut down. And thirdly, graduates who do not want to go for this national service will be fined heavily. But we have two arguments for you in the side of opening government. The first, what do individuals in vernacular schools go through? And secondly, how does our policy fixes the problem that vernacular schools creates? Before that, a few characterizations for the opening house. Firstly, what are vernacular schools? Vernacular schools are normally schools that are normally majority of one race. Things like Tamil schools and things like Chinese schools, where normally in Chinese schools there's a majority of Chinese people. Secondly, what do we define as national service? Things like military training, things like going and serving your country. Those are what the things that we define national service as and what we're going to debate on. What is the first argument that we're going to talk about? What do individuals in vernacular schools go through? Two levels on this. What are the type of things that they are exposed to? And secondly, what are the effects of such an environment? Firstly, what are the type of things that these people are exposed to? Since there's a lack of another race within those schools, it's very easy for individuals within those schools to assume that the other races are normally horrible human beings. Like things like how Mahathir normally had things like racial policies that normally disenfranchise other races, and therefore you can easily paint that Muslims or Malay people are much more horrible people, and therefore it creates this type of exposure where it's only due to one race, and therefore it becomes this exposure which is much more racist compared to what we want, and therefore you create a school and you create a system that makes our society less nationalistic in the long term, and just makes it less nationalistic at all. But before that, sure.
Why is it that being in a school with the majority of one race will suddenly lead to extreme hatred for other races?
Okay, no, it's only because it's very easy for people to use that type of hatred in those schools. Because it's very easy for people to use that type of thing. It's much more easy to indoctrinate these people to fuel them with hatred for these other races, because it's something that they can all relate to, since they're all one majority of a race. It's something that is much more easy to do in the long term. And yeah, secondly, what are the type of effects of such environment? Two things. One, a lack of exposure to other races, which in return makes you feel much more uncomfortable between other people. Therefore, you therefore feel you don't trust a lot of people. You don't have any type of faith within those people to cover your back. And therefore, it creates a narrative that all these people, all these other races are people which are bad. And then that also creates a world which is you also create a Malaysia is less nationalistic. I'll tell you why being nationalistic is something that is important and something that's beneficial for society in the second argument. But people who go through this normally can happen and will probably happen because of like things like sejarah, things like history, where they teach you things about how the Chinese normally dominated our economy and had all those type of all those resources that all these other people didn't have, and therefore you have certain type of hatred for these races, because it's much more easier to fuel your hatred, because it's much more easier to indoctrinate them within those schools. And secondly, the lack of nationalism within those schools. Since there's one race only, you're not very exposed to other races. You're not going to be able to live. You're not going to be able to have friends with other races, which makes it much more easier for people to segregate you in a community, and makes it much more easier for people to segregate you in general. Have a seat. Secondly, how does our policy fixes the problem of vernacular how does our policy fixes the problems that vernacular school creates? 3 levels. Firstly, why national surveys are everything? We feel that national surveys is something that brings people together. People who join the military are normally people who are very close to each other and people who normally will have each other's back for that. And we feel that national service will create a type of bond within other races that can make Malaysia much more nationalistic and create a society that is less segregated than what it is currently. Because the society we have today is normally segregated because of these vernacular schools. Because the narrative that all these other races are much more better than what they actually are, and therefore you don't create this bond between these other races. You only create racism, and you only create a society that isn't very nationalistic. And secondly, what are the problems? Why do these problems need to be solved? We feel that we need to solve this so we can have less racism within the community, which means less segregation in total. Meaning, like, if we are able to fix these problems and we are able to fix how these vernacular schools fuel people with this type of indoctrination, we're able to stop as much segregation as possible. Because in Malaysia, the people are segregated. People are Indian are normally disenfranchised from other people because of certain type of laws and certain type of policies that are in place. And we feel that that type of segregation is normally also fueled between these nationalistic groups. Before 6, sure.
If the segregation and the hatred between races are so bad as you wanted to tell, then how is your 1-year-long national service going to help?
We told you already, military is something that can bond you together. It's something that can really create a bond between someone and can basically make you assured that that one person that you are with has your back. We feel that national service can create that type of bond between other people, and something that is clearly very important because of the current racism between society and current segregation in society. And the third level, how does fixing this create less segregation and benefit society? If you create a society that is much more nationalistic, you create a society that can cooperate together. You create a society that doesn't really care about your race, which means economical benefits where people really won't care and will hire you because of all those type of things. It's like a society that doesn't really care about your race, a society that is something that is beneficial, a society that is some type of economical benefit. My second speaker will be talking to you about the benefits of nationalism much more in this speech. So we feel that is a comparative. We feel that the side of opposition has to tell us why things like not creating bonds between people within these vernacular schools. They have to tell us why there's something that's good and why these certain type of structural problems won't be fixed on their side, how they will be able to fix it.
Thank you very much for that speech. I would like to invite the leader of the opposition.
Yeah.
Side government creates a world where now national service is now a toxic environment for races to compete with each other, for these races to compete who is the better citizen, who is the better soldier that serves the nation better. Before I move to the 2 questions I'll answer in this debate, few rebuttals, right? Because we think Tira came with a very nice, and a very, very neutral speech on what's the problems that happen within these vernacular schools. But we think on their side, right, their world is the world that will most likely cause the racial segregation, which we'll prove to you in this debate. Number 1, why is it so that national service is the worst place to put segregation together? Because number 1, we need to understand these people come from vernacular schools, meaning they've only been exposed with the people of their same race. Probably they would have judgments to other races, right? Meaning that these people already have internal rivalries. But even worse, they already have cliques within their school, meaning they've spent 5 to 6 years in their school with their friends, with people of the same race. This is the reason why when you force all of them to go to these schools, they wouldn't necessarily integrate with every other race that you're trying to bring up. Understand the fact that these people will be the ones making cliques, trying to mix around with people of this similar race. What happens is that you cause competition within these you cause competition between these cliques. Because how national service works is things like military training, where they put you in groups, and if one person fails, everyone takes brunt by punishment. Things like having 100 push-ups, things like having to run 10 laps around the field. We think these are the kind of things that happen. What happens when certain groups fail is that people will always try to point out which race is the weaker one, which clique is the one that are unable to catch up with the training, the ones that are unable to catch up with the regiment. We think what happens now is that people start to bring out rivalries, right? Rivalries within the national service itself, where people would start calling out things. People will bring nasty remarks about people just because of their race. We think this amplifies the racial profiling even more. We think the point in which you amplify the racial profiling within the national service itself takes away the whole point of having the integration or the one Malaysia notion. We tell you that your side brings up the more toxic discussions, the more toxic environment, where people will have to attend the one-year regiment to have rivalries with other cliques. We think these are the kind you stop making friends with other people of these races, because we need to recognizing that the fact that these people come from the same schools, meaning that they will always try to direct competition with other races. We think that because this is the national service is the place where they can be the most competitive with each other. This is being things like who can be the most patriotic race, which one is the one that can last longest in your training. Because of this very competitive environment is how these people will start, how these rivalries will be intensified even more. So on their side, like how they try to characterize how they hated them even before they were sent to national service, we think your side makes it worse. We think your side puts in all the people that come from enclaves, like people like how they are all coming from these same schools, meaning that you push them into, you corner them into an environment where they'll always be competing. But before everyone, sure.
Is there any analysis in here about the victims that are exposed to things that counter the very things that they were taught in schools, that break the stereotypes, and people that were just given exposure that they weren't given in school?
We tell you that their school, we need to understand the comparative, that people they stay in their schools for 5 to 6 years. These are the kind of people who already have fixed minds. And understanding that their parents already sent them to a vernacular school means they most likely come from the enclaves, where they come from places centric, like SS2, where it's more centric for the Chinese, or where Brickfields is considered to be the area where it's more centric with Indians. These are the kind of childhoods they're brought up with. So we tell you that the stereotypes that you try to break on your side doesn't happen, but moreover, they're trying to amplify these stereotypes. These are the stereotypes that your side will more likely amplify because people are unwilling to integrate. Explain how on your side you will make sure that national service will put them into integration. We tell you it doesn't. We tell you it takes away the whole purpose of brotherhood in the army. We tell you it becomes toxic. But secondly, what happens to future generations who enter national service? We think that 1 year program is enough for people to come back. So after graduates finish your program is where you would tell your other peers what happened. You would tell your other peers the ongoing competition. So with that ongoing competition, we think you entrap these students to multiple years and years of these rivalries. These are the kind of things that you cannot stop, because people will start making it will get more but it will get serious over years, right? We think that these are the kind of things that it can even it will start by throwing nasty remarks, but it can also escalate to bigger things, like things bringing in politics, like people will start bringing things like, oh, you're privileged, you have the Bhumiputra privilege. The comparative on our side is that we will pick people at random. We think national service should not be something subjected to people just because they came from a vernacular school. We think the whole objective of national service is to bring people together, not to start toxic discussions by only taking graduates from vernacular schools. These are the kind of problems you will cause within national service itself. Why does this escalate, right? We think that the more and more rivalries that escalate means that it's harder for you to integrate people even within the schools itself. So being that these people are unable to integrate with other races, or being unable to understand the other races or to break the stereotypes, is the point in which your whole objective of bringing all of them together fails. We think segregation on your side happens even worse, where they would spend their 1 year in the national service program sticking with their own cliques or trying their best to avoid and prove that they are better than the other races. These are the kind of things to subject to the students forced within these national service. But also, these students, the graduates who are unable to catch up have to take it, they'll be blamed for it by their race, right? So for every mistake you make, means that people will take it out, oh, it's because you're from this Chinese school, because you came from this school, it's because of your race. We think that racial profiling is also more amplified on their side. So even if your side can tell us that, oh, because their forced interaction will mean integration, we tell you that it's not true. Our side gives you the better comparative, where we tell you that racial profiling will amplify even worse. And we think our side gives you the better, we will stick with status quo.
Vernacular schools in status quo propagate their own cultures, and we think that's extremely hard for us to propagate nationalism. We can create a country that cares for one another and defend what it stands for. I have 2 rebuttals in form of questions for you today. Firstly, can our 1 year long national security help? And secondly, will more victimization happen? But firstly, can a 1 year long national service help? We think that it is that they came up with us that is not enough, but we tell that on a comparative, right, that we provide a better society and future generation, because we think that a comparative on side opposition is that they have no friction they haven't come across such individuals, and therefore in the future it is more likely for them to believe and their beliefs to set in that such individuals are more horrible individuals and individuals that don't deserve it. And I think the comparative coming from such opening government is that we believe that sure, to some extent we agree that it's not enough, but we think on a comparative is comparatively more than what side opposition provides you because we provide them comparatively more, and in fact we force these individuals to integrate together. And secondly, will more victimization happen? We think that sure, to some extent we can agree that more victimization happens, but we think we create a world where we force these individuals to integrate together, right? Because we think that when we force them to work together, they are more likely to work together in the future. We think that the competitiveness is not between races or gender, but we think it's rather between teams, right? Because we believe that a lot of these individuals get too carried up, and we think that you get actually carried on in the spur of the moment, and are more likely to care about competitiveness between teams rather than competitiveness between races, right? I have 2 arguments for you today. Firstly, how we create a more accepting society and future generation, and secondly, how we make a more patriotic society. But firstly, how we create a more accepting society and future generation. We think that by forcing these individuals into national service, it means that these individuals will end up trusting their teammates, right? I think this is extremely important because we think that it's quite likely their teammates are going to be of different races and of different backgrounds, and we think that it allows you to see these individuals from different points of view and how they do see what they are better in and see what they are weaker. And we think that it's so much better compared to side opposition, where individuals have no friction with these individuals. Closing.
If you have so much of entrenched hatred and competitiveness within the national service programs, why are teams then willing to be able to acknowledge the merits of different races if they're so caught up in what they're doing?
We think that on a comparative, they are more likely on a comparative to see these individuals compared to your side, where you don't give them the chance at all to be with these other individuals, right? I think it's quite like that teammates will be from different races, and we think that it allows you to see them from different points of view. And it tells that if you can trust your Indian teammate or your Malay teammate, it will mean that and previously you had no encounter with such people, it would mean that you're more likely to trust such individuals from such races, because we think that your experiences make you who you are. And then a lot of these individuals often come from conservative societies. For example, Chinese students who come from conservative Chinese families, right? And we think that they have little to no friction with other races and have no experience working with other people. I think that what happens is that we also make and ensure that these individuals are more patriotic, right? Because it will mean that they know that they're fighting for their country and they're fighting for cause and standing for one thing. We think that the comparative then becomes a world where individuals don't care about each other and a comparatively more racist society. And side opposition has to define a world where individuals are always racist and don't care about one another because you don't integrate them together. The second argument, how we ensure a more patriotic society. We think that vernacular schools propagate a lot of cultural propaganda, and it means that such individuals find it extremely hard to become patriotic. But we think when we teach them to fight for their country, they are more likely to be patriotic because they feel that, oh, they are doing it for the country, and they are comparatively more likely to be patriotic compared to side opposition where they feel no patriotism at all and always believe and eventually get cemented into their cultural Chinese or whatever beliefs, right? And I think that this is extremely good and creates a cycle because when these individuals then become parents, right, it would then mean that they are less likely to propagate only their culture but be more patriotistic. And when it comes to their children, we think that it creates a cycle where parents are comparatively more patriotic and their children comparatively more patriotic. And we think that we better achieve a world where there's more patriotism in which TN50 really wants. And we think that what the benefit of nationalism is that we have a country that cares more for each other and is less likely to blame one another, because we think that if a country, if you're really patriotic and you really care for your country, we think that you're comparatively less likely to blame other races and you're more likely to work together as a team. I think this is extremely important coming from side opening government, because we think that a lot of these individuals in status quo have no experience at all, right? I think the only way to remove racism is in bringing patriotism is to force it into these individuals, right? I think that a lot of these individuals lack patriotism, and I think that we think that a lot of this the benefits of patriotism is that a lot of that you're less likely to become you're more likely to trust your country. And I think that's extremely good because it will mean that when anyone stands up against your country, you're more likely to fight back. And I think the only way to remove racism and bring patriotism is to force it into these individuals.
Thank you very much. Into the opening speech, I'd like to invite Yellow.
When students from vernacular schools have already created cliques within those schools, being closer to the people in their schools in comparison to the people in other people's schools, we think that is when they feel that they don't want to befriend other people. That's when they block themselves out because they prefer their friends over other people. So I've explained to you in my speech in 2 questions on how side opening opposition takes this debate. Because firstly, my first question I will ask is whether or not this competition in the national service is good. So first, we need to establish what this clique and what these schools, the vernacular schools, do to the students. We have to understand that the point in which there are cliques within those national services is also when they are too comfortable within those cliques. They rather go back to their cliques during lunch breaks, not during training times, in order for them to feel comfortable. So when they are in the team, we tell you that the problems that will happen is likely to be that they rather be friends, and they will find the flaws in the friends that they have or the people that they meet in those teams because they don't feel comfortable in those teams. So secondly, we have to understand that this is also when so for example, if a person comes from SJKC Prechai 2 or like SMK Daman Desa, we think that this is when they are unlikely to befriend each other because they don't feel comfortable and we don't feel like they want to befriend with other people. So the difference is when we don't have cliques, we have to understand that is when they feel they feel like they have to make friends with the people in their group. So what happens when these teams are punished because of because of someone is weak? We think that this is when they will have to find somebody who has to be punished, or to find somebody who is at fault, find somebody to blame within that group. So this is when they need to. This is when they will start pointing out flaws in their friends, flaws in their teammates, yeah. So we think that this is when they will increase the competition between these people. So what happens then, right? We think that this is when you will strengthen the stereotypes within those national services itself. Reason being, because when you're trying to find flaws within your teammates, this is when you will point people out, like saying, for example, the Chinese are individuals who cannot do this particular task as well as compared to another person, because of the way, maybe because of the stereotypes that exist. So we think that these are the types of stereotypes where you will strengthen because you will try to point that person down and try to blame that person as the perpetrator of the reason why you are punished. So we think that is when it also becomes toxic, as Anna has told you, but greatly ignored by the side of government. We tell you that it's not true that when these militaries will become a place where they bond with each other, but instead becomes a place where discussions become toxic and people start hating each other because they feel like they need someone to blame in those cliques, in those groups. So this is so what happens then, right? We think that this is when they will go back to their cliques to complain to their cliques on what has happened in training, whatever problems that they feel, and we think that is when you make things worse, because that's when cliques from different schools start to fight against each other and start to fight against each other because they think they want to blame a person from another clique, right? A person from another clique. So we think that this is when you cause segregation to be worse in the side of government, because because you cause competition to be the goal of everybody's minds in order for them to prove that they are individual who is a better soldier within the national service. Before I move on, sure.
Tell us why giving people who are victims of circumstance and no chance at any type of exposure is something that will break the stereotype and the narrative that society has brought.
So yeah, we do agree there's an existing problem that people are victims of circumstances and cannot be exposed to other people. But we don't think that this is the right way in order for us to expose these individuals. We think that there are other ways to do so. For example, when they do go out and get into college, where they do integrate into, like they do meet other people in those cases, we think that is a better alternative compared to your when you force competition on these people and try to make them bond in that way. We think that a better comparative is when they do grow up and later on get hired into jobs, that they do meet people in the workforces. We think that the reason why this is better is because they don't spend the whole of their days and the whole year spending with races that they don't, that as you said, hate, the races that they hate and people that they don't want to integrate with. So we think that this is when you worsen the situation, worsen the segregation, and when discussions become toxic, bring in politics in order for them to prove their point, in order for them to blame a certain person for the problems that happen within those groups. So the second question that he asked, what type of patriotism do you bring towards these people? So we think they told us about patriotism and how national service brings patriotism, but we have to understand that the nationalism and the patriotism that they bring will be centered around race, and this is when they will try to prove that they are a person or they are someone who is more patriotic than the other. How do they do so, right? So they will try to outcompete each other in order for them to prove that they are the more patriotic one, they are more nationalistic one. So we think that this is when they also bring that, where competition also brings brings segregation and brings segregation between people, right? So we agree there will be patriotism, but they will try to prove that they are the ones who should be the proper patriotic ones and the nationalistic ones. So why is this problematic, and why do we prefer a world in which prefer a world where they do integrate in workforces instead. So we agree there's a problem when certain people when they don't meet each other, but we don't think we don't think that we will cause segregation and competition to be as bad as you make it to be. So we tell you that in our world, although it's true that segregation, although it's true that people live in different areas, we think that to the very least they don't hate each other, and we tell you that is when the competition doesn't push them to competition doesn't push them to blame each other when someone commits a mistake or someone does something wrong. So in our world, we need to accept the idea that although it's true that segregation happens, we don't make segregation worse. We rather a world in which these individuals, although they may not see each other every day, may not that exposed to these individuals, but they don't hate each other. And in our world, we think that it's a world in which patriotism isn't centered around race, and it's a nationalist, is a world in which it's better achieved because there's no competition in the middle of this, in the middle of trying to bring these people together. We don't think that military is a place where these people can be bonded. When you have cliques and you have individuals who don't feel comfortable around other people from other schools, which is other races. With that, I'm proud to propose.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you know, keep it again.
Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that racism does not stem out of maliciousness. It stems out of relatability. In the opening exchange of this debate, they talked about hate and why it perpetuates racism in general. I don't think that happens in the vast majority of cases, especially in the national service programs. What we will talk about in the closing exchange, closing government specifically, is fear and what these individuals specifically feel within the national service program, and talk about the subconscious harm that takes form in adulthood once these individuals leave vernacular schools, as well as the national service program. All of my rebuttals towards opening opposition will be integrated into the questions I will ask. So firstly, why is this necessary to ensure that vernacular schools are in line with TN50? Firstly, what do vernacular schools necessarily look like? I think there are four main characteristics. Firstly, the methods of teaching are specifically different. That means they emphasize on different things, even though they teach some part of the national syllabus, there are emphasis on many different things. Secondly, I think the emphasis of teachers themselves that take place are different. That means they emphasize on maybe more on an academic level, less on a national unity level. The third thing that happens is that these institutions roughly comply of a specific race, or mostly, all of these specific race. Fourthly, but most importantly, I think their syllabuses differ from national syllabuses. So even if they didn't differ and they were slightly similar to the national syllabus, I think teachers, because of their power and ability to place emphasis, they are able to pick and choose parts of the syllabi that are relatable to the national syllabus that they can place emphasis on, and therefore they can bring emphasis on national unity and more on academic level, and therefore focus more on their race in general and the importance of their race. Why is this harmful, and what do vernacular schools lack given these characteristics? I think the emphasis on national unity is one that lacks very much in vernacular institutions. This can be done with intention or even without intention. I think the opening government talked about intention very much, how within vernacular schools they intend to focus on their own race and the importance of their own race. What we will talk about in opposition is the more pernicious and harder to regulate intention, which is characteristic which is without intention, and the subconscious ability for individuals to react. So I think the major composition of this vernacular institution is a particular race concentrated in one school, right? That means the people you interact with will definitely be of your own race, and you will interact with that person for many, many years. Why is this harmful? Because from closing government, we think that the perception individuals create of other people is directly correlated to the people you necessarily interact with. That means all the happy moments that you share within that school, all the negative moments that you share within that school is with a certain and specific race, and you bond with that specific race and the individuals that are within that specific race in general. This means there is no bonding, there is no respect, and there is no happy or negative memories you can have with any other race within that vernacular school. So the relationship and the process in which we develop relationships is very less within vernacular schools. Why is this harmful? I think this creates layers within society and how people perceive other races, or rather how people perceive their races in comparison to other races. So it doesn't necessarily have to be directly hating other races. It could be me prioritizing my own race more than another race, right? And me fearing interacting with another race more than my own. So people now under your underside opposition are more likely to socialize with people with the same race because they've spent years in their life interacting with individuals that they call themselves their best friends, and they call their own race as well. So an example could be your own best friends are most probably the ones that you grew up with in school for 6 years, another 6 years in secondary school. The same concept can be applied in vernacular schools where you grew up with that same race, with an individual with the same race, and this creates your relatability with that certain race, with groups that consist of that certain race. And I think that's very harmful in terms of us interacting with other races in general, because we feel as though we are most comfortable with our own race only. And this is specifically harmful within a country like Malaysia that emphasizes national unity as a very important thing. And if we fear other races, then I don't think that's good at all. Before I move on to proving why PN fixes that, sure.
Why is it that races are suddenly then willing to be more open to each other, to the point at which we forcefully make them interact?
Yeah, okay, that's my argument. Apart from technical skills, we think that this program also fills empty spaces that vernacular schools were never able to provide. How? So we have larger levels of camaraderie that happens among races within the national service program. I think there was a misconception from opening opposition of what necessarily happens within the program. That in this program, you are required to trust your own life with other people, with other races, with other individuals, theoretically. Your own life, your hard work, your cooperation with other individuals is very essential to you succeeding in this program, to gaining respect of respect of your facilitators within that program. These are all experiences that you can't get in colleges, that you can't necessarily get in other institutions as well, because this is very specific. This is what the program intends you to do. It intends you to work with your own, with other races within the country, because it's so important for national unity. And this also responds to opening opposition argument about how there's stigma and there's hate. I think there is zero tolerance for hate and racism within the national service program, especially because it's a government program and they have to foster for unity in general. So as a result of this, they are put with other people, they are put with other races and placed in positions where they have to socialize. So what we do is we break preconceived biases. We break things like telling people to not protect your own race, to not have certain political opinions. And this responds to our opposition argument about how you hate people, because you can't choose who you are with in a national service program. So our comparative is simple. The exposure that you provide is not an exposure in comparison to the camaraderie and trust that happens within the national school program, because it's very exclusive. It's the intention of the program, and it's how we move towards TN50, and we move towards creating a country that loves each other and loves every race within each other. Thank you.
Integration and acceptance of different cultures within multicultural Malaysia comes with allowing these races to celebrate their cultures with the existence of vernacular schools. We will be the first house in today's debate to contextualize this debate and explain to you the reasons behind why parents send their children to vernacular schools and why it's unfair to punish these people and the impacts that it creates in society today. I have one extension for you today. That is why it's unfair to impose different standards on these people. But before that, a couple of rebuttals. So the main thing coming from both government houses was that integration, more exposure, therefore better interaction. But all of this was premised on that interaction being positive, which was only their best case scenario. They never argued what would happen in the case that these interactions went wrongly, and I will explain to you the reasons why these interactions are more likely to go wrongly later. We would rather not take the risk because the harm of these interactions going wrongly is disproportionate to the benefit that you get. You want hostile interaction with a person from a different race within national service, and for your entire life, you will be more hostile towards that race. We would rather not take the risk, considering all the different ways that these interactions could go wrong. No. So they wanted to talk about how integration would happen. Opening opposition said that it would be hostile, but we will be the first house to explain to you why. So the reason that parents send their children to vernacular schools is often because they want their children to learn the language, culture, have a support structure of the same race to share their struggles and the discrimination and the things they face. That is why parents send children to vernacular schools, not because they don't want to integrate. The point in which people get punished for embracing their culture and the Malaysian government is actively creating a policy that targets these individuals and doesn't allow them to thrive is the point in which these individuals become less open to the idea of acceptance and embracing these other individuals. We don't see why you should punish these individuals for wanting to embrace their culture. Their culture and their language, and having like extra Chinese New Year celebrations in a Chinese school or having Deepavali celebrations in a Tamil school means a lot to these individuals, and we don't think you should undermine this by saying that the only reason they go to vernacular schools is because they want to separate themselves from other races. But even if positive interaction does happen, we think it's only for the nicest of individuals in this society, a tiny fraction, whereas for the rest of the individuals, their culture, their language, their festivals and their celebrations, which means so much to them that they have to be punished for, is what will cause the hostility of these reactions. Under the side of government, we celebrate these vernacular schools. We don't delineate them from regular government schools. We allow them to thrive. And the fact that we're treating vernacular schools the same way as we treat every other school in this community is how we tell people that equality is important, that we should allow people to open up schools and celebrate their culture. That is how we show equality, not by targeting policies at these vernacular schools. These people will get turned off by the idea of acceptance when they feel like it's a threat to their culture. When it's the reason fewer people attend vernacular schools because they want to avoid the year-long of national service. When fewer vernacular schools set up because they feel like their students have to be subjected to a year-long of national service. That is how you tread the cultural diversity in Malaysia, and we don't think it's justified for state government to do this, regardless of whatever benefit they could bring to us. The comparative is this: we must provide the best environment possible for these multicultural schools to survive. Considering the already very volatile state where there's already so much discrimination against these schools and people are against them starting up in the first place, we need to treat them equally, because otherwise this discrimination will just perpetuate and will make it harder for these schools to survive. We need to protect the minority of people who want to protect their culture, not the who want to protect their culture. Closing.
So you can educate people for 6 years about equality and why it's important to unify. But how do you change and empower the comfort individuals feel with other races?
So we agree the process of equality might be slightly slower because individuals are normalized, but they don't get turned off by it. When they feel like the government is treating them equally, allowing their schools to survive, treating them like every other school in the country, that is when they will be open to the idea of acceptance, because they don't feel like they've been threatened in any way possible. Racists under your side feel like they've been threatened, and that is when they get turned off from the culture. Now to my extension, why it's unfair to impose different standards on these people. So the reason parents send children to these schools is to learn language and culture, and it's because they're proud of their ethnicity, and they feel like their children will be in better environments in these culture. When the point in which you impose standards on these parents, you force them to go to national service for an extra 9 months compared to parents who send their children to government schools. When there's when you create an active, like a visible difference between students from vernacular schools and students from government schools, because there's a lower likelihood of being selected for NS if you go to a government school, that is when you threaten the ability for these cultures to survive. We shouldn't punish parents for making choices about what they felt was most comfortable for their children. Malaysia shouldn't punish these races for being but they should instead allow these races to embrace their culture. The reason parents send children to school is because they find relatability and support structure within the schools, so that children can share their struggles. It's time Malaysia starts supporting the survival and thrival of these different cultures instead of finding a way to actively oppose it. The second thing that you do is you create a negative perception around this culture. So the rest of society will assume that that culture is threatening the integration and equality of Malaysia. People in the more liberal people of society will be more opposed towards these people trying to embrace their culture. They will make it harder for them to have open and huge celebrations during their festivals. They'll make it harder for vernacular schools to open. The bigots in society now have a reason to target these schools because the government is supporting them by saying that these vernacular schools are a threat to equality. You have to understand that these people who go to vernacular schools aren't malicious, like you said. Rather, they are just people who are trying to embrace their culture, and we should not punish them for it. Your side makes it easier for bigots to hurt them. Your side makes it harder for these cultures to thrive, and that is not the Malaysia that we want today.
one of the many things I love about this country is that the culture that we have knows no bounds of race. Because we are all able to celebrate the cultures of differing races and differing beliefs without being discriminated for it. And that's why opposing extension, I don't see why would ever threaten the cultures of these races. Because I see why they celebrate a grand manner with other people, with other different races, with other that share the same land as that. The only culture threatened in closing opposition is the culture that directly or indirectly offends other communities and offends other beliefs, because these are the cultures that cannot be celebrated outside the grounds of a vernacular school, because these are the cultures that you will get flagged from the rest of society for indoctrinating people into we are a country united. If closing opposition wants culture to survive, it must be inclusive culture to survive. It must not be culture that is toxic. It must not be culture that is one-dimensional. I think all other houses debate are forgetting why PLKN is the best medium. It is not interaction. It is state-facilitated interaction. It means we take any and every measure to break people up, to reduce cliques, to ensure the groups that you are in are made up of people of differing races, to ensure that when you patrol with someone else, when you're punished with someone else, when you celebrate a win, you do it with other people. And that's why it is as close as it comes to positive interaction as we can get. When you're down, you share embarrassment, you share celebration. You don't stab other people in the back because you wouldn't expect that to happen to you as well. As selfish as people are, this is the positive interaction that we can get, and is the positive interaction that is beneficial to no other. I'm going to look at the comparatives, because there is no comparative in opposition. The only thing we heard was college. Guys, college is PLKN without facilitators. It is PLKN without a zero tolerance policy for racism. We have boundaries. We have limitations. If you allow this to manifest into a harm in adulthood, I don't see when they are going to fix the problem of racism, when they are going to fix the problem of relatability that plagues us all. Let's look at closing opposition in detail a bit more. Apart from this culture thing, which I think I've dealt with, they also tell us that there's a negative perception. This is where these guys were quite flippant on the types of victims in national service. Sometimes they were hardcore bigots. Sometimes they were victims that didn't deserve enough exposure. And for the times that they didn't deserve enough exposure, the immediate jump of logic in closing opposition was that they will hate, instead of stopping to consider that they will also love, they will also understand, they will also be given the exposure that no one else wanted to give them in the first place. If CO accepts that there are some people that just do not know, there are some people that are just afraid, why can't we force them to talk? Why can't we force them to share, like to share patrol, to share punishments, to share anything and everything that you otherwise would have done in war? Because under their side, bigots will be bigots. And I'll deal with opening opposition and this entire generalization of racism in opening opposition. But as far as closing opposition goes, insofar as they accept that some people need, like, for exposure, this is the best exposure that happens in closing government. Insofar as they cannot provide us a comparative, another alternative, another medium, another place where they can facilitate proper interaction, I don't see how they will win this debate. What did Sean talk to you about that these guys didn't want to engage with? We told you a couple of things. One, we told you vernacular schools do not fit the line of TN50, and we need to fill that void with national service. Have a seat. Opening government talks about outright indoctrination. We talk about the pernicious harm, because schools are the places where children create perceptions about communities and individuals based on the experiences that they have. That means it doesn't mean you have to hate other people. It just means you have to have an imbalance in priority and respect towards your own community. It means, and it pushes forward to a couple of harms that Sean says. A, it creates unintentional offense. When you choose to interact, when you're more comfortable, when you go to an interview, go to an event, you reduce and you're less likely to talk to people of an opposing race. It creates unintentional offense, which then breeds racism that is likely to occur inside opposition, all because they were never given exposure about what people are like, all because all they know is rumors. They don't know what people of opposing races are like. And the extent of the harm here is that unintentional offense is then capitalized on by the biggest
advocates that opposition say are so harmful. People then capitalize on the ambiguity of where we stand to then create into uproars of racial tensions, racial conflicts, because when a fight breaks out, the most relatable person is your race. The most relatable person in a conflict is the people you grew up with. That's why racial tensions are more likely, because people don't want to pick a side, but the only thing they know, the only way they know how to pick a side isn't on merit. They pick sides based on relatability. And this is why indoctrination, and this is why the subconscious harms of less relatability to other races is particularly harmful. Why do we tell you PLKN helps this? I think over the top of everything is facilitated interaction. For the 6 years you missed it in school, we'll give it to you in the course of 9 months. We'll ensure that you understand that these people are no different from you. You'll also share positive experiences with individuals. But let's look at opening opposition, because opening opposition has some positive claims towards this. They said competition will occur. So opening opposition only talks about hardcore individuals, but even to these people, I think we can break them. You know why? In war, you don't pick who you serve the country with. And in a replication of war, you also don't pick who you serve the country with. Meaning, even if people are self-prioritizing and people are selfish, they still have to protect other races to protect themselves. You won't rat somebody out. You won't call somebody out. You won't carry out selfish actions, because people will give you horrible treatment for doing it in national service, for not being like, not protecting other races and not protecting other individuals. You're put in groups and you spend the most amount of time together. I don't think you can go 9 months without sharing experiences with somebody else, without talking to somebody else. At the very worst case, we still get some interaction. The opposition can never guarantee, under unregulated circumstances, national service is the most regulated environment to carry out this interaction. But more importantly, they talked about the hardcore individuals. I understand that bigots exist and they might sway the perceptions of individuals. But PLKN has a zero tolerance policy. We will punish racism. We will isolate racism. We will carry out talks, education, anything that comes as close as possible to ensuring people are more educated, as close as possible to ensuring people know their limits. So people, at the very worst, might be racist, but they're more likely to keep their thoughts in their heads because they are negatively reinforced to know that they shouldn't offend other individuals, because they are punished and negatively reinforced to respect other people. The worst case under closing government is that we have racist people, but they're less likely to act on racist tendencies, because through negative reinforcement, we reduce their ability to act on said racist tendencies. The best case under closing government is we give them regulated interaction that won't exist. And I've yet to hear how it will exist in opening and closing opposition. Because if it's not for PLKN, where we do have a zero tolerance policy, where we do take every step to ensure you talk to other people, you share experiences with other people, you feel sad, happy, and embarrassed with other people, I don't see what Malaysia they are looking at.
Forcing Chinese people to specifically engage and interact with people of different races doesn't make them want to integrate or engage with you more, but it makes them feel like they were racist people brought up in racist conditions, and they have more of a reason to live up to that standard in the first place, because it's the standard that you impose upon them and you label them as racist bigots. It's even harder for other races to be able to listen to what you have to say about yourself and your culture, because they will always immediately label you as the race that needs to be integrated, the race that is the cause problem of racism within society. You make it even harder for these Chinese individuals, for vernacular schools to be able to talk towards people who are of a different race. I have two issues for you in this debate. The first, on why people are less likely to want to integrate, but secondly, on why society is more likely to be unwilling to accept the different races. But before that, several levels of clarification to the side of closing government. Because, no thank you, the main point that we needed to engage on was that in vernacular schools, not all parents are malicious and not all of these students have malicious intent to be racist or to be segregated from other races. Oftentimes, like my extension speaker already told you, that they have their own personal reasons for feeling more comfortable in vernacular schools, and that's why they don't opt in to these other forms of schools. But here's the thing, what happens to the malicious, let's assume in your best case scenario where there are malicious people in these kinds of vernacular schools. First thing we'll tell you is that this is to a smaller scale compared to the average reasonable parents that you have within vernacular schools and the average students that you have. No thank you. But here's the thing, you make it a lot harder for nice parents and nicer students who aren't racist to be nice, because you make it seem as if they need to be punished for being part of vernacular schools, and you make it seem like their choice of institution is one that labels them bad. But here's the thing, you give a lot more ammunition for malicious parents to be racist, because they can always point back to the government and say, oh, the government thinks we're racist and that's why we need these kinds of punishment. They will always find excuses to tell you that the government is being disproportionate to them, and that's why you make it significantly worse, the point at which you impose this kind of punishment onto these races, but you make it a lot harder for them to integrate, the point at which you paint them in a light where they are so malicious and they are so racist and unwilling to engage with you in any form of conversation that you need to send them to NS for an extra 9 months compared to other races. But secondly, here's where my extension speaker, the extension coming from my extension speaker was incredibly important when she told you about how you unfairly impose standards upon races by virtue of the institution that they choose to opt into. Because she told you multiple levels that these are the people that feel more comfortable having their kids in schools with with their own races because of the discrimination that they've been through in the past. And the very problem with side of government is them being unwilling to realize that it isn't always true that they're trying to segregate the races, but it's oftentimes that they feel like they want to protect their child from the discrimination that they faced before. On to the first issue in this debate, no thank you. Why are people less willing and likely to integrate under that side of the house? Because the main contention coming from both the government houses, which is relatively similar, was that they wanted you to bond throughout NS without actually telling us why that bond would form in the first place and why that bond is exclusive to you having in NS. But firstly, here's where we'll deconstruct the premise of the argument, because we think the argument is contingent upon them being willing to engage. But the point in which you try to force integration between races that never thought that there was a problem before is when parents will tell their kids that you should be wary of them, that you should be wary of the other races because they are the ones that pushed you in these kinds of circumstances. You make it so much harder for them to accept other races as you make it a lot harder for other races to be accepting of other people. But here's how you widen the gap between the races like Chinese and Indian individuals within NS itself. No thank you. Here's where you place a negative stereotype on Chinese individuals that went to Chinese schools and Indians that went to Indian schools. Because by virtue of the institution that they picked, you immediately label them as people who are racist bigots. This means that people on the ground are less willing to hear their plight and the discrimination that they went through and to solve that discrimination, because you will always believe that they are the racist bigots and that's why they're here to serve their punishment. No thank you. But this is the point where you don't target things like, you don't get to the core of things like racism, because you will always think that the words and the discrimination that they're trying to share to you is of less because they are the people that the state is trying to target and the people that the state is trying to punish. We don't think that's in any way fair. The same way we don't force like Indians in Shah Alam to move to like Kota Damansara because there are more Chinese people there, is the same reason why we cannot force integration upon races just because you think people within vernacular schools are more racist than those in state-funded schools. No thank you. But here's the thing. we need to stop placing a no thank you. But we'll also tell you the thing. It's not always true that vernacular schools always tell you to hate other races. You make it look that way, that the courses that happen within the school are ones that are hateful, because you will always place a stereotype on them, no thank you, that they need an extra 9 months within NS. But here's the thing. Here's why society is likely unwilling to accept the differences that you have in terms of race, because they realize that the point in which the state is trying to target you, they should also do the same to you, because they will always try to be principally in line with the laws and policies that the state has. And here's where the extension was incredibly important, when she told you, you make lives for other races, such as Chinese people, a lot harder for them to celebrate their religious beliefs, or to celebrate things like Chinese New Year and Deepavali, because they will always feel like these are racist celebrations that you shouldn't be having. Here's the link of logic that was incredibly important, because she told you the point in which you keep punishing students and families that went to vernacular schools is the point in which you keep labeling them as people that are unwilling to engage with you, or to be unwilling to be one in society with you. We think it's incredibly important that you allow these individuals to realize that there isn't a problem with their presence, but we should always strive for integration on its own, not forced integration.